Macy's has all of your Grill Master essentials for Father's Day. Stop by to get our hand-trimmed chicken breast and certified Angus beef patties that are ready to grill, so Dad can have his favorite dinner. Make sure to browse our bakery to find the perfect no-work Father's Day treat with our decadent peanut butter bars or famous donuts. Right now, you can get boneless beef ribeye steaks for $12.99 per pound at Macy's. Shop these Father's Day essentials in-store or online at Macys.com through June 18th. Macy's, happy shopping!
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. You ever thought to yourself, what are some things that I just should not grow in my raised beds? Or have you ever thought, I can grow anything I want in my raised beds? Well, Batavia and I have found this little list here that sums up basically what you shouldn't grow, but I don't know if we definitely agree with all of it. So let's hash that out. What do you say, Batavia?
Yes, let's dig in.
Let's dig in. It's it's an interesting concept. Have you ever gone to plant something into your garden? Because we both do raised beds for the most part, and thought to yourself, maybe I shouldn't, or do you just kind of put whatever you want in your raised beds and call it a day?
The pause that I had, my very first raised beds were raised beds on top of concrete. So there was no earth underneath it.
Yeah. And
I had a lot of pause around whether or not I could grow certain things in that space. But once I got to the place of, having raised beds that were sitting on top of soil, like there was no stopping me. I never thought about what I couldn't grow in there for the purpose of it being inside of a raised bed.
And after looking at this list that we've acquired, do you agree or disagree with any of them?
Well, I can empathize with a couple. Like I get the trouble that you could experience with it. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to do it though, because that's kind of the space I have.
Right. Yeah. I looked at it and thought to myself, absolutely not. There are things in here that I am growing right now and I will continue to grow. And then there's other things that I don't know, I kind of go on the fence about. So we're going to go through this list. It's a short list, but there's a lot to talk about here because I think the message is a little skewed. So I think it's definitely beneficial to go through it. And there's a little bit of being realistic about what we're growing that I think is important to discuss as well. So we'll definitely do that. And before we get started, though, if you guys can share this episode with one of your favorite garden friends and turn them onto the show, help us out, become a subscriber and become a patron if you'd like to support the show that way and pick up some seeds from our seed shop. Link is down below. We are in the process of getting our next round of seeds ready for the next year. So we should, in the coming, hopefully within the next month, have a full year's worth of seeds in the seed shop. So it's been a slow build, but we're almost there. So thank you so much if you bought seeds, and we look forward to seeing you there. But that being said, I'm not going to read this article word for word. But I'm going to start at the very top and go down. The first one that it says you should not grow in a raised bed. So the title to this is "Don't Grow in a Raised Bed, Do This Instead." So I think that's an important aspect to it. But the first one is fruit canes. And so what we're referring to is like blackberries and raspberries. What are your thoughts on that? And do you grow? And as we go through these, we'll both say if we do or don't grow or have or haven't grown any of these in our raised beds.
No, I've never grown blackberries or raspberries. I've watched others grow them, and I kind of get why. It's interesting why that, this is a don't grow it in a raised bed. It's interesting because the reasons as we go through, it's not the same reason for each crop that they mention.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's no consistency there, which I think is fine. But you look at it and say, immediately my thought is don't grow because you don't have enough room. That's the constant thought. And forgive me, guys and gals, I have, a little bit of something that's stirring up in me. And so, I'm even more nasally than I normally am. So, just note that this is not my normal speaking voice. So blackberries, raspberries, never grown them. If I were to grow them, I would definitely grow them in a raised bed. So there's that, having not read this before, prepping for this episode, and even reading it now, I'm kind of still like, I think it still works.
Yeah, I mean, I have blackberries growing in my yard, not in my raised bed, and they won't grow. They just they suck. They get 6 inches tall, and they've been that way for years. I'm kind of almost given up on them. Thought about, I was just out there the other day, and I looked at them and was like, you know what? They're still alive. Let's see if we can't do something for them next year. So I'm gonna kind of test it out. And I've tried to grow raspberries, and I've not had much luck in them. I know when I was living up in New England, I had a neighbor that had raspberry bush that was, 8 feet wide. And what they said in here is raspberries, they have a lot of suckers that come out over them. So, you'll have a bush, and then you'll have another bush, and then they'll just kind of grow out from there. So when it comes down to it, let's say you didn't want to put it in the ground for some reason and you only had a raised bed, I don't see a problem with it if you were just like, hey, this is my raspberry raised bed. It doesn't say, I feel like it's kind of a doo-doo part of the article because it's not saying, hey, it takes up too many nutrients or anything like that, or, it needs, the roots need more space. What it's saying is they just take up a wide area because of the suckers.
I think it's helpful though, because sometimes we see a deal on something. Oh, it'd be cool to grow raspberries, or it'd be cool to grow blackberries, or whatever have you. And we grab it and we, put it in a space. I don't know. The listeners will have to tell me how many people that grow in raised beds have the space to actually dedicate, something that's perennial like a blackberry or raspberry plants plural, and dedicate a whole bed to them, and I know raised bed sizes, vary, but I'm immediately envisioning someone that wants to grow raspberries in a raised bed, but also other things.
Yeah.
So to that end, I think that, the caution is important. Yeah.
And they also say blueberries. So blueberries don't do well in raised beds. It adds in here. And I grow raspberries. I grow blueberries, but I grow them in my yard as like a hedge. And, they do require acidic soil, which we naturally have here. This area is known for blueberries, so it works out well. But I think and I think the point of this is really, people that want to grow a berry of some sort. I would say, the guy, the gentleman that mentored me with bees, who's now my partner, he grows grapes and basically a raised bed. And that's all he grows. Is he has like a huge pergola filled with grapes, and it's basically a raised bed. And he does very well with it. I think there's options, but I think when it comes down to it, you got to think about space. And what they're saying here about blueberries is because it needs to be acidic soil, it's more expensive for a raised bed. But at the same time, I don't know why we're just instantly saying raised bed. Like, think outside the box and plant them like a bush. You know what I mean? Do stuff like that. And raspberries, by the way, they come in bush varieties and then non-bush varieties. So there's two totally different kinds of growing. The only raspberries that I want to grow are bush varieties, which I don't think grow well here, which is sad for me, but I mean, it kind of is what it is.
Well, you think like it's generally recommended to grow, and this may differ by a couple of varieties, like for blueberries to grow multiple plants together, multiple, blueberry trees together, bushes, whatever have you. And so I read the part around it can be expensive when you think about it, because you're, again, making that soil acidic, which really leans into you're likely only growing blueberries in that space.
Yeah, I mean, one blueberry bush isn't going to do anything. You need to have quantity. You need to have multiple bushes in order to really, because it takes a couple years. I mean, the first year or two the first 5 years we grew them, it progressively got, the first year we got maybe a half a handful. And then the second year it doubled, and the third year it doubled. And now we're getting probably, I think we got we have 7 bushes maybe. I think we ended up getting about 15 pounds of blueberries off of them over the season. So, it did add up, but it took a long time to get there. But I didn't plant them just for that. I planted them for the, what's the word I'm looking for? For the aesthetics of it. To have a hedge, an edible landscape is what I was planting them for. They did say here to try strawberries instead in your raised bed, which is really what I wanted to talk about for this. Go.
Well, it's funny because the idea, so when we talked about because I absolutely really wanted to talk about it too, so I'm just as excited, right? Yeah. So the blackberries and the raspberries, when it talked about, basically you're going to have, it's a little invasive, right? Strawberries are similar. I have had a bed dedicated to strawberries, and strawberries are perennial in my area in Chicago, Illinois, and where the zones really matter now, garden zone 6, right? But I didn't have great luck kind of that next season, and so I moved them. But I can see the value in dedicating a full raised bed space. And my raised beds generally are somewhere around 7 feet long and 3 to 4 feet wide. The front yard raised beds are a little bit larger. But I say that to say, and this is a theme in these first couple, like you're planting something, and unless you've really dug in and read a bit about it, and sometimes you just have to experience it, the amount that you're getting from this harvest, you kind of, everything that we're going to talk about when it comes to space and how much space or how little space, I always think like I need 3 times the space to really make this worth my while. Like it sounds great to say I can get a few fresh strawberries or something like a sweet strawberry from your garden, but a few strawberry plants really isn't, for me, worth my time. And so then it's like, well, can you go halfway with it? Well, no, like I'd really love to be able to go all the way with it, but I just can't dedicate that much space to strawberries alone, right?
Well, you're talking about you have everbearing and Junebearing. So, your everbearings are going to, throughout the season, you'll get smaller, inconsistent harvest, but your Junebearing, you'll get them all at once. It's kind of like a determinate, indeterminate. But think about that. You dedicate a whole bed that's going to be strawberries for the whole year, and you get them, let's say you want the biggest and best harvest, all of them in June. June-ish, the name is misleading, but June-ish. I mean, that doesn't seem worth it to me. And I'm with you when it comes to planning out my garden and going through it. I definitely look at it and say, how much am I going to get? And a handful of strawberries, I'm right there in the same boat with you. I mean, write this down in the books. It's just not worth it. And I've grown strawberries many times, and I will tell you they are delicious. I love them, but especially when they come out of your garden. But at the same time, it's just absolutely not worth it. And you want to talk about invasive? they start shooting them runners off. You've got to clip the runners, plant the runners, keep it straight. And then a perennial bed on top of that, you got to keep it weeded. It's just, I mean, and I would honestly say, hey, instead of strawberries, try raspberries or blackberries personally. I mean, you know, the thing with blackberries is, okay, so they sent, let's say, and I'm using blackberries specifically because my mom grew them and she had, I don't know what she had them in. They may have just been in the ground, but she had like a little trellis, probably like 3 foot long and probably 5 foot high or 6 foot. And it would just absolutely take over. It would grow. She would get gallon bags full of blackberries every year. Why not put that on the end of your bed on a trellis and let it grow? You know what I mean? Then it's not taking it up, and it's just a creative way to look at it to create that space for it. So I'm not really jiving with it at all. I will say I don't think blueberries should go into containers or anything, but I'm a little biased because of the area that I live in. So, you know, if you really wanted blueberries, you just need a lot of them.
Yeah, blueberries in containers was one of the first fails in my garden when I really started to expand and diversify what I was growing. I bought what I consider now even expensive plants. I can't remember the price point, but I felt like, oh gosh, this is more than I really wanted to pay. Got them shipped like 5 plants or something. It was from some like blueberry farm, and to make it worth your while, either they only shipped in like the smallest batch would have been 5 plants, or maybe to make it worth my while to pay for shipping, it was 5. But either way, it's like now I need 5 containers. And my favorite, if you ever watch me over on Be Better Garden, I have these kind of rectangle-like containers. They're not designed for growing food. They're planters, you know, generally speaking. You get them in your big box home improvement stores, and they're really pretty for flowers. But anyway, so I planted them in there. My gut tells me that I didn't prepare the soil the way that I should have originally. But either way, they didn't make it to the next season. And it just felt like such a waste. I did not plant them inside of a raised bed only because of how I arm wrestle with myself every year about perennial plantings in my raised bed space.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and so I probably would have had more luck if I would have planted them like maybe inside of the cage baby, which every year and a half I teeter on making that just a fruit space. But inside of the cage baby may be on one of the far ends in the raised beds. But then I look and say, I don't eat a lot of blueberries only because they're expensive. If I had access to them at a more reasonable price or inside of my garden, I would eat more of them. But it's the same thing when it comes back to the strawberries and so on. Have I matured as a gardener and can wait the couple of years? Maybe. I'm not necessarily ready to claim it completely, but still it's the how much space I'm dedicating to it and what's it going to produce. So think about that 7 foot by 4 foot space. I probably get, 3 good plants in there. That's, probably the max. And how much food I could produce in that space in the years that it would take for them to produce. And even when they're at their height of production,
right.
Still, when I think about season to season, how many other things I can plant, it's always kind of that's the arm wrestling going on in my head.
Well, we got to go to the next one. I just looked at the time. Corn and grains. You grow corn, right? Mm-hmm. Do you successfully grow corn?
I mean, yeah.
You've not had like an ear of corn like from the grocery store?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I've had like a perfect ear of corn.
Okay.
But corn is on my spoiler. Look, we're gonna drop a little gem here on my list of considering discontinuing the growth in my garden.
Okay.
Corn is on that list for me. And what they wrote here really resonated with me. Now, what I can say with corn is you don't need as much space as you think. You don't need a field to grow corn and grow it successfully. But I'll come back to that. But what are your thoughts on it? Yeah.
Well, so past couple of years, I've been kind of growing a little bit of corn here and there, testing it out. We did, let's see, the first year I did like a little square foot of corn. That didn't work. So then I did a full bed last year. And I think it was a bad bed. So then we started over. We did it in what I thought was an optimum bed. It didn't do great, but then I also did popcorn this year, and it got full size. I did not get full size ears, but looking back at it, that was my fault because I had the raccoon that kept visiting me, and so I stopped my liquid nitrogen because that was what was attracting him. And now that we've got that under control, and we've got a new nitrogen that we're using that's not blood or fish, we're going to try that out and see if that will make a difference. And I'm also going to, the first year I did a full bed, the issue I had was I had inconsistent germination. So next year I'm going to try and start them and plant out starts. I know it's not recommended, but I will say this, there's a farm up the street from me, and in the spring they have a school bus filled with individuals, and they all get out to plant corn, and they've got little plant seedlings in their hands that they plant. So we're going to do the same thing next year and try that, because if you're doing it in a small space, the question is pollination, right? And the issue I had was inconsistent germination, which means everything was pollinating at different times. So we would get one or two plants that would pollinate, but then the other ones wouldn't be prepared. So if we can get them out there at the same stage, I'm thinking that will help with that pollination issue, and then we can get them all growing at the same time. So this is just part of the path that we take to do it. Now, I do believe that you need to do a full bed of corn. I do think that makes it a little bit easier, a block of corn, but kind of is what it is. I mean,
Yeah, I've tried little patches of corn. I have also had issues with germination, consistent germination, and needing to come back in and resow, and then you have them growing at different. Corn is one of those things. So far in these last handful of years I've grown them, it's not as easy to catch up, because by the time that the other corn plants that have originally germinated get size on them, they start to shade out the ones you come back in and resown. So I've tried the smaller plots. Generally, let's say if I sowed, a dozen in a real tight spot, I may get half of that to actually produce ears of corn. Like, I'm just tossing some numbers out there. I've done a half a bed of corn. It's done okay. I think it's one of those things like the variety, the time exactly that you're either transplanting or direct sowing, right? And then how you're feeding it, that all plays into it. And so that's like hard stop. Those are the things, at least a few things to consider. And then you fold in how much space, because all of this is assuming that raised beds equal a smaller space than a 40-foot row that you'd grow in, or, a 40-foot by, 20-foot plot or something. Like, that's what this article is assuming, that if it's in a raised bed, it's a smaller space, which I think is generally a good assumption, right? I mean, I don't know that many of us even have 20-foot long raised beds, just when you think about material costs and all of that. This is probably one of the ones I agree with the most, but it's still possible, absolutely possible to grow and have corn produced in a raised bed. Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to beat my head up against the wall for years and years and years doing it like I have other plants. But, I can see out of a 4x8 bed, in a 4x8 bed, we're typically, I think this year we planted like 60 plants. So if you can get 50 ears of corn out of that, you get a lot of corn to put it back. So, and it all depends on your family. Like, we don't eat a lot of corn. They lump in here also with the do not plant barley, millet, and oats. I mean, all I really want to say about like edible grasses and stuff is like, how much are you really going to get out of a raised bed? You're going to get a bowl of oatmeal or two. You're not going to get enough to really make it worth it. So, that's really it comes down to. And then they said, the other thing, and it's super weird, but then they say you can use amaranth, which you can eat like spinach, just grow spinach. They say you can add interest by growing runner beans and French beans and stuff like that. And I mean, in my eye, in my mind, and this is just me personally, we're not talking about growing a raised bed for interest. We're talking about growing a raised bed for consumption. And if you want to eat corn, then French beans and runner beans don't make a hill beans to what you want. You know what I mean? Like if you want to grow corn, grow corn. Give it a shot. You know, you may find that it works, you may not. Just know that there are challenges that come with it.
We've talked about it this year, earlier in the year, like when we're setting goals and things. It's kind of like the crops, the spotlight crop.
Yeah.
Right. The thing that's in your garden that you're focusing on and putting energy into more so than you are the rest of what you're growing. And I think that corn is a pretty fun thing to grow. I look at it and I balance like, and I won't bring up the other vegetable to keep us on track, but the balance of I love corn, but I don't eat a lot of it, right? And it's not even for health reasons, right? Although I probably should add it to it. But I kind of balance like when it's in its height, I can get it from the farmer's market, right? You know, and so I balance that, and you know personally that, and some of the OG listeners know this as well. And thanks for sticking with us all of this time. That there are a lot of crops. Maybe not a lot. There are a number of crops that I will grow for a few seasons, and I want the experience, right? And so once I gain the experience, my view on continuing to grow that crop may change.
The way I look at it is this. If I could no longer go to the store and get corn, would I be upset that I didn't eat corn? And my answer is simply no. I would not be upset. So it's not a high priority. If I was planning out my garden, I just like, I don't have room for corn, then I wouldn't grow corn, but it's not the same for everybody. It's, you've got to look at it objectively and personally and make the decision for yourself. Now, here's a big one. Here's a real big one. Pumpkins, squash, watermelons, loofahs, all that. In a raised bed. Don't grow them, supposedly.
I hate them.
Have you seen my garden?
I hate this list. I hate this list for this purpose. I've seen your garden.
Have you seen the Seminole pumpkin? I think if I added all the vines together, the vine growing in the raised bed would be probably around 200 feet long right now. It is just absolutely insane this year. It is crazy. But it's in a raised bed. So
aggressively vining crops. I grew sweet potatoes inside of the cage baby. So the cage baby spans about 30 feet. And the main beds, they're raised beds inside of it. So the actual wooden cage is just sitting on top of these wooden beds that were there prior, right? I mean, it's secured down. But there's a 7-foot bed, a little space that I grow in, then a 12-foot bed, then another little space that I grow in. I planted sweet potatoes in the 12-foot bed, but I didn't even plant them from end to end. I may be using like 6 or 8 feet of it. But you know that the sweet potato vines have completely taken over the 12-foot space and have, leached over into the spaces around it. So when I think about this, and because it's a cage that has like wire and things on it, like the structure of it that's sitting on top of the raised beds, it's crawling because that's what vines do, all up those things. When I grow melons in the front yard raised beds, generally speaking, the benefit here is I'm trying to grow them vertically. So I hate this item on the list because I think that they're right. Like never, ever, ever. No, of course, because I'm clearly doing it. And if I didn't grow them in the raised beds, I wouldn't be growing them at all. But I get the point. It is a lot to wrangle in, right? Like if the plants are healthy and they're getting the proper water and nutrients and all of that, like they are going to go wild. They are going to choke out other things. Like it's a beautiful mess, but a mess all the same.
Yeah, I don't agree with it at all.
Yeah, I know you don't.
Yeah. I mean, I grow a full bed of sweet potatoes every year. I grow the Seminole pumpkin. I grow butternut squash. I grow melons, all those things. And it's all in the way you design your garden. It's all in the placement of it, your expectations of it. I mean, look, if you're going to grow, let's just keep it simple and say we're going to grow a melon. And you're going to put a melon in the middle of a raised bed and you want to make sure that you plant around it, then you're sadly mistaken. But if you plan for it and you say, I'm going to grow it on this trellis and then I'm going to trellis it out of my garden and then I'm cool if it just takes over part of my yard, then absolutely go for it. And I think that that is a great way to use space. Vertical gardening is a real thing. It doesn't have to be the hanging gardens of Eden or anything crazy like that, but you can plan it out appropriately. And absolutely, I mean, look, I just pulled in yesterday 15 Seminole pumpkins. My count so far this year, and we're coming up to the end of it, is 52 pumpkins. That's how much I pulled off of that vine. And I will tell you this, that vine, those pumpkins will get us through the winter for eating. Between that and our sweet potatoes, which are vining, we will have enough food to get through the winter from our garden.
That's in a 4x8 foot bed.
The sweet potatoes came out of the 4 by everything that I grow is in a 4x8 foot bed. Yes. And the Seminole pumpkins in the bed only take up 1 square foot in the bed. That's it. Because I have it going up the panel and then around.
Yeah, this is the key, though. If you put young Ben's garden next to mine, like, cut them out, paste them, do one of those tricks that you can do with AI now. The design of our gardens are so different. There is not a space that I have in my garden based on the current layout where I could have vines just trailing out the way that yours do. I think it's beautiful.
Right.
I think it's whimsical. I know that that's not your goal. I think that it adds interest, but I don't have a space to be able to do that. And so when I look at it, like, there's sacrifices that I make when it comes to growing. A good example of, like, even with the vertical growing, and I'm not recommending against growing these types of plants in raised beds, but I understand the call out. I am able to get to only one side of the raised beds comfortably in the front yard that have the trellis on it. And I put the trellis there primarily to grow the types of crops that are on this list. And so you remove the trellis and I have much better access.
Yeah.
And for me in my space, I probably don't talk about the importance of access to your growing spaces enough. Right. And so you look at, again, it's back to the top item that we covered off on. What are you sacrificing to do this? Now, if I had a thought of getting, and I enjoy Seminole pumpkins, I've never had them, so maybe I do enjoy them, 40 of them of a storing crop, I'd be like going up, accessing my garden from the other side all season long. Like, I let it do its thing, but you don't know that until you know that. You know what I'm saying? Well,
and that's the thing is you take it one step at a time and you just, I mean, I understand. Look, it's a pain in the butt. I mean, I'm stepping on this vine. I'm like, I don't even care. I've got to get somewhere. I get it. It is what it is. But between that and the sweet potatoes, we've always planned our gardens out appropriately so that we can have these things grow outside of the bed. And you'll see it every single year. Come by next spring, Sandy Bottom Homestead on YouTube, and you'll see every year that these vines will grow out and we plant it. And I mean, that's why we use the planter app. It's the design portion of it. You can take that planter app with the drag and drop interface and you can put those things on the side of the bed. I put them right on the edge in those beds. And then you'll see, in your head, like, hey, this watermelon or whatever is going to grow 25 feet long. And I know that it can't stay in that bed, but if I put it right on the edge of the bed, give space around it for the roots, guess what? It has space to grow, and it's only taking up a small portion of the bed. And I mean, if you get into the aesthetics of it, then absolutely it can look whimsical and all that stuff. Within that app too, you can put trellises on there. You know, I can take a bed, create a bed, put a trellis on there. It shows up as a little dotted line. And then right on top of that, I'll drop a watermelon. And that'll tell me like, hey, it's going on a trellis. And then I have a plan. I would never put it in the middle of a bed unless that's all I wanted to grow, and that was just that. Then I may do that. But for the most part, it's just right on the edge of the bed and it grows out. And I mean, look, this, if you're going to plan a garden out, the planter app is the way to do it because it is so visual. It'll make it so much easier. And once you grow that watermelon the first time, you'll see. I mean, I remember the first time I grew a watermelon, it grew back and forward, back and forward, back and forward in my garden. Like I had to keep wrapping the vines around and manually get into it and actually guide it the way I wanted to guide it to grow. And that vine was probably 100 foot long in itself, and I was getting 50-pound watermelons off of it. So if you look at it that way, there's so many options that you can do. And it's really a shame that they will tell you like, hey, don't ever grow them, because I mean, if I didn't grow that stuff, I would not grow a garden anymore. I would stop because it's so productive and so many options. But using the planner app, the drag and drop interface, the combative and companion plantings and all of that, the trellising, all the data that they have in there is really useful. Grab the link below, get yourself a discount on it. It's a lifetime membership. You only pay once, and the discount is very healthy on it. So you will be many years of use out of it, and it's consistently updated. So check it out. It's on the Google, Apple, and Play Store. You can use it on your phone, PC, tablet, and that's it. So check out the planner app. That's the PLANTER app. And then they say on top of that, instead of growing pumpkin, squash, watermelons, you should grow cucumbers and zucchini because you can grow them vertically. And smaller squashes, well, I can grow melons vertically. You know what I mean? Like I've had green beans that grow up my trellis and back down to the ground. And it's like, it's the same thing. I don't understand what the point is of telling gardeners this, because it's difficult. You know what I mean? They do say that cantaloupes will do well on trellises.
Those are clearly, and it's called out, different families of crops, which react differently. Everything that was listed above, pumpkins, squash, which may or depending on what type of squash, like if it's a winter squash or something, watermelons, loofahs, those are heavier fruits, right? You know, so the end thing you're growing are heavier. Consider that. By the way, the butternut, the take on the butternut, it's a honey nut squash. I accidentally planted it. Thank goodness I accidentally planted it in the space I did. I only had 3. I basically had one plant. It had 3 ripening squash on it. Why did I come out before we started recording when I was looking outside? And the squirrels are hungry hippos this time of year. It started nibbling on one of them. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you can have all of the rest of the tomatoes I have here. Like, leave me this squash. I've been waiting all year for this. But it takes more room, right? You know, the actual fruit itself. Something like zucchini, if you're growing it vertically, it's not like the vegetables are... how should I say, as heavy, and you're harvesting them much more often. So that definitely plays into, think about the waiting game when it comes to the others. So again, I get it. I do have some empathy around, you know, gardeners or future gardeners that could read this and think it's absolute. You know, a part of the work that we do here is to, you know, poke at whatever the air quote standard is, right? You know, this is an article on home and gardens. You know, you want to be able to say it's trusted, but
well, I mean, you go in the grocery store and you see home and gardens, you pick it up, you read it, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to grow pumpkin squash or watermelons. And it's like, no, you should grow pumpkin squash and watermelon, at least to see what the growth pattern is. And if you like that, you know, I got those garden arches not for the aesthetics of it, but for the function of it. And it's definitely helped. And I'll tell you, I've had the Seminole pumpkins ripen at the peak of the arch, and I have not had to make any kind of hammocks for them or anything like that because they have a thick stem. Would I do watermelon that way? No, I would not, because they don't have a thick stem. But pumpkins, have you gotten a pumpkin and seen the stem on the end of a pumpkin? Yeah. That thing is stout, Buck. I mean, you know, there's no reason not to give it a shot. And then, not to mention, we need to say varieties make a difference.
Yep.
So varieties can change the game completely. Don't grow a 50-pound watermelon. Grow a personal size watermelon. You know, grow things with big stems on the fruits. You know, get a more, I'm trying to think of the word, a more stout variety, a more compact variety that doesn't have as long of vines and stuff like that. There's a lot of different options you can do. But I will say this, if I want to grow a pumpkin or a watermelon, a zucchini or a yellow squash or a cucumber is not going to fulfill that nutritional desire that I have to take over my desire to grow an actual melon. I don't buy it at all, and I'm sorry. But I think that you can do both, and then you can meet it. But if I want a watermelon, I'm going to grow a watermelon, and I'm not going to let Homes and Gardens stop me from growing a watermelon. Good?
Renegade.
The next one's real easy. Invasive herbs. Have you ever grown an invasive herb?
Macy's has all of your Grill Master essentials for Father's Day. Stop by to get our hand-trimmed chicken breast and certified Angus beef patties that are ready to grill, so Dad can have his favorite dinner. Make sure to browse our bakery to find the perfect no-work Father's Day treat with our decadent peanut butter bars or famous donuts. Right now, you can get boneless beef ribeye steaks for $12.99 per pound at Macy's. Shop these Father's Day essentials in-store or online at Macys.com through June 18th. Macy's, happy shopping!
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
Absolutely. I actually spent 2 seasons trying to dig out mint in a raised bed that I planted there before realizing that it was invasive. And fortunately, it didn't take over the full bed, but it took over, again, I think, 7 feet by 3 to 4 feet. But it definitely took over about half of the bed. And even when I thought I dug it all out, it was like 2 seasons later, I'm still, those roots are monsters. And I do live by this. I don't plant, these invasive herbs inside of raised beds. I only use containers. I think you have a better chance of them returning if you have them in a raised bed, if that's the thing you want. Because mint for me does return. Sometimes it doesn't in containers, depending on how cold the Chicago winters are. Sometimes it does.
I've grown mint in a raised bed for the purpose of growing mint in a raised bed, where I went into it and said, this is all I'm putting in this bed. Go for it. And that worked well. But I do agree with it. Unless you're doing something like that, I don't think you should put it in a raised bed. And a raised bed, let's be clear, doesn't have to be 8x4. It can be 2x2.
Yep.
And that's how I did it. I grew it in a 2x2 bed, harvested it probably 15 times that year, and got 3 to 4 pounds of mint dried. So, I have done that. But, try to stay away from stuff that is very aggressive. I mean, we're not talking about basil. We're talking about perennial, very hardy, which is mint. I mean, I was living in New England at the time where we'd get below 0 temperatures, and the next year I'd have, another couple pounds of mint to be harvested. So, Yeah, I agree with this one. It does say to try arugula and then thyme, parsley, cilantro, all that. I mean, those just don't fall into it. Again, if you want a mint, find a way to grow it in a pot, make its own bed, but it will spread via rhizomes. And then it also says to grow nasturtiums to put in salads. I'm not big in putting that kind of stuff in my salads. I don't know. I'm kind of weird, apparently, but it is an option that you can do.
Another invasive herb that they mentioned was lemon balm, and absolutely agree. It smells wonderful in the garden. The key here is I have a 2 foot by 2 foot space that would be perfect to dedicate to something like mint. I have a fire pit, two fire pits that grow in the front yard. It's like 36 inches for the fire pit and across, and that'd be great for like just dedicated to the herbs. If I knew that I could do that for a season and then come back and change my mind and grow something different easily the next season, I'd be all for it. But as I mentioned, it took me 2 to 3 seasons to get the mint out. And I'm talking about growing years. And so that's the reason why I wouldn't do that unless I was basically committing to it being a perennial bed for that mint. At some point, I imagine it probably dies back after a number of years, but this goes back to how important it is to you, what your space is like, how you want to use that space in the future. All of those things are something to consider. I don't know how. I mean, I didn't think that arugula was considered an herb. Like it's kind of like, don't grow these invasive herbs. Instead, grow arugula / rocket. But I mean, I guess. It did also suggest, in case you guys take a look at the article, cilantro. And I agree that cilantro isn't invasive, but if you let it go to seed, it's notorious for reseeding. I have a space in the front yard that I planted cilantro, and you guys know I'm notorious for like just letting things go when it comes to it going to seed. I must have planted cilantro like 3 years ago or something, and every spring, and again, that's it's coming out of winter. It's one of the first things that pops up because those seeds have actually traveled to the front yard flower bed, which I rarely ever grow food in. So how in the world do I get cilantro in there? So just keep that in mind when it comes to if you're growing it in a raised bed. If you cut it all out or dig it up before it goes to seed, no problem. If you let it go to seed, you're going to have it, next year. Yeah. If you let it go to seed next year, you'll have it again. That may be what you want, though.
Yeah. And I mean, if that's what you're going for, like I did with the mint, absolutely. So there's always a reason to kind of go outside of the norm, but be realistic about what you're going to get. And I will tell you, nothing will take over a garden more than mint. End of story. It's incredibly invasive. Our final one, which I think is one of the most important ones, are certain root crops. So we've got potatoes, asparagus. Those, they say they take a lot of space and they have intensive root systems. Don't grow them in a raised bed. I have a 4x8 raised bed and I got 80 pounds of potatoes out of it. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. You know what I mean? I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I can't. The potato bit, I can't. I've never gotten 80 pounds of potatoes, and I've not grown in a 4x8 foot bed, which is the reminder of, I'm being skimpy on my growing space for some of these crops. And of course, there's the feeding schedule and the watering and all of that and that contribute to your production. But like, I don't get the potato bit. Yeah. I actually don't get the asparagus bit either. Right. So I have, remember the asparagus fail from a few seasons ago where it was really the plants themselves. Right. So only a few of them actually produced that year. And then even since then, the asparagus, when it comes up in the spring, it's still questionable. Like, I wouldn't invite you over to dinner, young Ben, and say, hey, enjoy. But I have it it's a poor man's raised bed in that it's in ground and I have landscape timbers framing the space out. So it's hard to call that a raised bed. But even if it was a full-on raised bed, I don't get the why not.
Well, I think
they both could use space.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the idea of us, we're looking at raised beds and thinking that they're just smaller, you know.
Well, I mean, you plant a potato one every square foot. You know what I mean? And then from what I've experienced, after the emergency's over.
Fire truck.
Yeah, fire truck. Once I plant one potato every square foot, and I usually get about 4 to 5 potatoes out of each square foot, roughly. Some may be more, some may be less, but that's typically what I get. But I dedicate a whole bed to it. Mm-hmm. And this is one reason why I've gone into the method that I've done where I'm filling up beds with certain crops, meaning monocropping, because they do need more space, but I allow it to have more space and I'm okay with that because it allows me to manage my space a little bit better. One thing I know, I've not grown asparagus, and I kick myself because I'm like, I don't want to grow it. You don't get a harvest for the first year. By the time, I'd be selling asparagus on the side of the road by now. But what I do know, like my man, P. Allen Smith, I hadn't talked about him in a minute, but he's one of my favorite gardeners.
Thought you all were on the outs or something.
Nah, bro, we're still in. Me and him, we're good. I could never be upset with P. Allen Smith. He's, old school. And, but I saw him grow in a raised bed, but he dedicated the whole bed to it. Yeah. And the whole idea was, I'm going to let them do what they want to do. And that was, and that's kind of where I got my inspiration from that, was just like, hey, you want to get a lot of something, you've got to plant a lot of something. You can't plant one row of potatoes and be like, I want to get 100 pounds of potatoes out of it. You just can't do that. You need to plant multiple, plants and get them in there. And I think like the way my garden's shaped up over the years is I started out and I would grow, every square foot would be a different plant. Every couple feet would be a different plant, something like that. There was never a row that was always the same plant. But now it's like I have multiple rows of it, but I'm starting, ever since I've done that, I've been getting the harvests that I've desired. And potatoes was a really big one, and absolutely grow white potatoes and even sweet potatoes, any potato in a raised bed. Absolutely do it. But give it the whole bed. You'll be happy that you did it. You'll get the return that you're looking for. If you do it in pots and stuff like that, you definitely can be, successful. And look, let's call it what it is. I view a container as basically a miniature raised bed. That's how I view a container. And you see people all the time that grow potatoes and sweet potatoes and corn and all this stuff out of these containers. So it's absolutely possible to do it. You just need to be realistic about what you're going to actually get out of that raised bed. Right?
Here.
So instead of potatoes and asparagus, try carrots, turnips, and parsnips. Instead of that, do potatoes, carrots, parsnips, and turnips all in raised beds and be happy about it. One thing I will say is those last ones I said try instead. You don't have to do full beds of those. You can do a row because you can plant double, triple, quadruple rows of them and get the harvest you desire. You can take one bed and put a row of carrots, a row of turnips, and a row of parsnips in it and get enough to be happy with. You know what I mean? To make a difference in your grocery bill. That's what we're really talking about here. We're talking about making a difference in your grocery bill. We're not talking about trophies. We're not talking about accolades. We're talking about making a difference. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm pretty sure you are too, being on the show. So that's what it all comes down to for us.
The thing when it comes to the if not this, try that, like they're not one-to-one. So you look at something like potatoes and the harvest time compared to turnips, you'll get turnips quicker. You look at something like parsnips, which is more like a 100-day crop, closer to potatoes, but you may have parsnips in your garden as long or longer than potatoes, and carrots sit somewhere in between, your turnips and potato harvest. And obviously there are potatoes that have, short, and long day or long harvest potatoes. So just consider these things when it comes to how you're going to use the space. The one thing I'm looking forward to next year, and I'm pretty sure I'll continue to grow potatoes, is getting them in earlier than I have in previous seasons and being able to transform that space into something else, right? So getting for sure two sets of crops out of that space. And that is one of the benefits of dedicating a space to a particular crop, if you can get it in and out. Like I do that every year with sweet potatoes, where my sweet potatoes go longer than yours. So whenever I plant sweet potatoes, as an example, it is the end of the growing season when I'm pulling them out.
Yeah.
A little bit of a tangent, but for all of these, if you're thinking of the alternatives that we've mentioned here, just make sure you understand the in and out, planting and then harvesting time frame, because it may not be all things that are equal.
No, and it does make it a little bit more complicated, but I'll tell you, after my potatoes, from now on, I'm putting buckwheat behind it until I get ready for fall. The end of story. That's what I'm doing from here on out. It worked out really good for me this year. I really enjoyed having a bed of buckwheat there. It fulfilled my needs. And I didn't plant it right away because I needed to get the seed. So I'm going to get the seed over the winter, and then I'll have it on hand. And then I plant my potatoes in coastal North Carolina. I plant them in February, harvest them in May, plant the buckwheat, pull it by August, and get the next round in. And it's the way to go for me. So that's what I will continue to do. So that's our 5 lists. Don't plant in the raised bed. And I think we kind of massacred the list personally. They have some valid points, but the problem that I have, and I mean, truth be told, I read this stuff all the time. When we're going to start bringing you more lists like these, because I read them so often and I use them to my ability. But the thing is once you start growing and you can start picking these things apart, and you know what works for you and what doesn't. And that's really important, because we don't want to take anything that anybody says as gospel until you try it yourself. Now, if you go back to the beginning, it was like blackberries and raspberries and stuff like that. Stuff and asparagus that take multiple years to produce. There's a lot more on your plate. There's a lot more at risk. And to be honest, one of these lists is why I never planted asparagus, and we absolutely love asparagus. So I'm not saying I'm planting asparagus this year, but I'm not saying I'm not. I don't know yet. But that being said, we do need to get to the listener question of the day, and we're going to go back in time, and I have to apologize to this person because it got lost in the mix. But this question comes from Laura.
Hey, Laura.
Hey, girl. It says, "Hi, Young Ben and Miss B. Betta. Ding. Have you ever had problems with gophers? I've watched them pull a foot-tall jalapeno plant down into the pit of hell that is their tunnel. Also, I've had cabbage, cauliflower, and various perennials disappear. I've managed to catch them with traps, but what advice can you give this fed-up gardener? Garden on, good people. You got anything?"
This is not a misery loves company kind of thing. Sometimes I get frustrated with the animals in my space, and then I hear Laura talk about an animal that's going to take the entire plant and then, travel underground with it. It's just wild. Yeah. I've seen people use things like hardwire if you're using a raised bed. So you put the hard wire down before you build your raised bed. And I imagine also up along the sides of where the raised bed would be, build out your raised bed, put the soil on top. So that is supposed to prevent them from basically digging underground because they can't get through that hard wire.
Yeah, and
small gauge hard wire.
Okay, so I looked up. First of all, now that you've said that, this is actually the perfect time to talk about this, because this is when this kind of work would be done in the garden. Gophers can dig 2 to 6 feet deep. So, if I like what you said about putting like chicken wire, hard wire down, something like that. You can dig a trench around. You're going to have to go a minimum of 2 feet deep. And then what you can do is you can staple the chicken wire to the edge of your bed. Like if you have a wooden bed, you can staple that to it, and then you put it straight down, and that will help as it digs into your raised bed. You can stop it. We've done stuff with chicken wire for like digging animals, like especially around our chicken coop. What we did is we took chicken wire and we laid it up. We stapled it to the wood frame on the bottom and then brought it out like 3 feet from the edge of it. And so the animals want to go up and they want to dig right next to the coop, but they can't. They're not smart enough to say, well, hey, let me go 3 feet back. And over the course of a year, that wire got buried in. So you don't even see it anymore, really. So, you could do, obviously it doesn't work for gophers. She did try traps. You can get very creative with traps. I've heard of people flooding them out of their holes. Just stick a damn hose in there and run it and let it run for a little bit. I know we've had stuff. One thing about gophers is they like dark. We had a skunk one time, and skunks like dark in their dens. Well, we found their den, and while they're out, we put a lamp in there with a light bulb. Well, in a week, the skunk was gone because he wanted something dark. So you could do something like that. But yeah, they make all kinds of traps. You can do. I hate this. I have a rat in my shed right now. And I went yesterday. I was trying to find different traps and stuff like that. And I went to my local Tractor Supply. And when I was standing there, it was like gopher traps, mole traps, all these different things that you could get. Just traps for everything. And unfortunately, it's a kill and remove situation. It's not something that we want to do, but at the same time, like if you're protecting your food, you got to do what you got to do. So that's kind of the issue there. I don't know. Do you know what attracts gophers to a garden?
No, it's an interesting question, though.
Yeah.
Are you looking it up? Leonard?
Leonard! So Leonard sent me this thing about how to get rid of them permanently, and it was the in-ground fence. Chicken wire, and it says it should go 1 to 2 feet above the ground as well. So you could do what I said, like you staple it so it goes down, and then once you bury it, you staple another piece and just bring it out, and then they can't go up to it and dig. So, I think that's your best method is just prevention. And I think a lot of times prevention is the way to go.
Gophers don't climb up. Like, you don't have to worry about them scaling the bed then, right?
I guess.
Laura's bed is already in place, so I'm sure she doesn't want to, assuming she's growing in a raised bed, it's already in place. She doesn't want to, remove soil to put that hard wire down. So I like your idea of basically the hard wire around the perimeter of the bed.
Well, that was your idea, and then I added the top. Let's not trip.
I like your remix of it.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing is it sucks, but just do the project once and be done with it. You know what I mean? And that's it. Because once it goes in ground, it's not bad. Just make sure you buy something galvanized because it won't rust. So you want something galvanized. You'll have to spend a little bit more. But it says, what attracts gophers? Food. I mean, roots, tubers, vegetables, garden crops. So one other thing too is, here we go. Repellent plants like rosemary, lavender, or salvia. I love that. So salvia is an amazing pollinator plant. Super easy to grow. We're going to be talking, I just mentioned that we had lists. I look at lists of flowers, native flowers to grow constantly. And I don't even think I have to twist Batavia's arm to talk about that. So, and they're easy to start from seed, super easy to start from seed. So absolutely get them. They're perennial. They reseed. They're great. So rosemary, lavender, which also adds that aromatic touch to your garden, is apparently a repellent. A radio at night can keep them away. So do that. That's on the list here. So there's a lot of different things, but the hardwire cloth is definitely like the top thing you can do. So there you go. Do you think we answered Laura's question?
I do, but I think the apology is worthy, given that she probably doesn't have jalapeno plants in her garden right now.
Well, you know what? Grow hotter plants, so when that son of a bitch gets them, it'll burn his ass up and he won't eat anymore. How's that?
Yeah, but to your point, this is a really good season. We're rolling into, clearing beds and things to do kind of that real garden project type work as well.
Yeah. And I get moles every spring in my yard, but they go away when it warms up. I don't know why, so I don't even worry about them. But my buddy's got a trap for him, and it's like a little guillotine. It's pretty terrible looking. I don't know if he's gotten one yet or not, but he's definitely gotten them. So give it trap the gopher too. That was the other thing. Trap the gopher. Get a live trap.
Yeah, she says that she has some traps, right?
Yeah, get it and just keep trapping. So I think they like cantaloupe. I got a woodchuck one time, and I got it with cantaloupe. They're along the same lines, so put cantaloupe in there too. They like that. And then you had to remove them far from your property, so you got to go miles away, or else they'll come back. So that being said, you now know what you can plant in your raised beds, and just be vigilant. Be vigilant on the advice you get, and don't be afraid to apply what you know to your garden. It's a really important thing to do. So check out our YouTubes at Batavia's at Be Better Garden. I'm at Sandy Bottom Homestead. Pick yourself up some seeds, backyard garden seeds. Link is below. Become a subscriber, get the planner app, do all those things at your will, whatever you'd like to do. And be sure to share the show with a friend. Hope somebody likes it. And remember, on this show, we aim to do one thing, actually two. We learn to grow, and we grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by checking out our seed shop below. We have all kinds of seeds available for you, and we're going to be adding new seeds shortly, so check that out. Get yourself some seeds. It's free shipping, over $35 orders. So go ahead, get a full garden. What are you waiting for? Order your seeds and stock up. Or you can become a subscriber. You can either be an Apple subscriber or a patron, and that will help support the show. You'll get one free episode every month, an extra episode, that is. So we definitely would love to see you over there and become part of our crew. Join the Backyard Gardens community garden in Facebook. That's free. Go ahead, join that, and join the community where all the listeners get together and they can help each other out with their trials and tribulations and just show off their gardens. There's not a better way to do it. And if you're curious about what's going on in our gardens, you can check out our individual YouTube channels. So I'm at Sandy Bottom Homestead, and Batavia's at Be Better Garden. You can check that out and see how each of us are growing and what we talk about on those, because a lot of times we will coincide with the podcast and help add information in that maybe we didn't get out in the show, or we feel that's pertinent at a certain time of year. So check that out and enjoy seeing our gardens and what we do in them. And we have an Amazon store which has all the products that we use and recommend in our gardens, and it helps support our show. And we also add to this list periodically, so be sure to check it out periodically to see if there's anything that you need for your garden. Everything that you do, including a like and a subscribe and even a review, will help us learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.